This time on Film Ranker, we are looking at Steven Spielberg, perhaps the most beloved and well-known filmmaker of all time. Spielberg has directed a whopping 32 full-length films, including enormous blockbusters, critically heralded award winners, and some of the formative films of all of our childhoods. That number also means I'm going to be moving pretty quickly, so enough chit-chat, let's count them down from worst to best. Number 34, Amblin. This one's kind of a bonus, but Spielberg's 1968 short film is an interesting glimpse at what was to come. It's a simple boy meets girl silent film set to a 60s-ish rock soundtrack. It has some great shots, some funny moments, and kind of a mini twist at the end. It's necessarily simple, but it does its job. And it's worth watching just to see what got him that initial 7-year contract with Universal. Number 33, Twilight Zone, the movie. This one isn't really a Spielberg movie, as he shares the screen time with 3 other directors, and even then his chunk is a remake of a classic episode. His contribution is very Spielberg though. It's all about taking risks and embracing childhood. It's cute and kind of sad and has a great central performance from Scatman Crothers, but if you ask 100 folks what they remember about Twilight Zone, maybe 2 are going to mention this. The other 98 are going to say that gremlin on the plane. Number 32, The Terminal. Spielberg has made 32 films in 44 years, sometimes making 2 a year. It's just the law of averages that a couple aren't going to work. Enter The Terminal. It's an over-earnest story about a guy stuck in immigration limbo. It's a little bit chicken soup for the soul, a little bit local interest story. It feels a bit like a Hallmark movie, but with an all-star cast. But even with all of that said, I guarantee that your mom has at least one friend who loves it. Number 31, 1941. Spielberg's first and kind of only step into full-on comedy. 1941 is very 80s feeling slapstick, featuring some of the biggest names in sketch comedy history. And when it works, it's terrific. The Army and Navy fight, Robert Stack watching Dumbo, pretty much everything that John Belushi does. But it doesn't always work, and the format's a little bit too patchwork. It feels like a young director trying on something new, and to Spielberg's credit, he realized it wasn't quite the right fit. Number 30, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Don't be totally fooled by the monkeys. Not everything in the 4th Indiana Jones is bad. The opening's actually pretty cool. The bomb site is rad. It's interesting to see the X-Files-esque warehouse of amazing things. It's terrific to have Marion Ravenwood back in the mix, and Cate Blanchett is a perfectly fine evil Nazi. But as much as I love Indy, even I have to admit that the film doesn't really work, especially the pacing. You have to wonder what would have happened if they'd gone with one of the many earlier drafts, which included scripts from folks like Frank Darabont and Last Crusade writer Jeffrey Boehm. Number 29, The BFG. The books of Roald Dahl have been adapted into some of the most loved kids' movies of all time. Just look at Fantastic Mr. Fox, Witches, Matilda, or the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, even the stop-motion James and the Giant Peach. All of them are very different stories, but they all have a couple of things in common. They're surprisingly complex and surprisingly dark for children's books. They're kind of books for smart kids. Where the BFG kind of missteps is that it tightens the scope and brightens the mood just a bit too much. At the same time, it does look terrific, and kids are still going to love it. Number 28, Sugarland Express. Spielberg kicked off his big screen career with a quirky film about endearing cons who kidnap a cop in an effort to get their son back. Things start a bit slow, but once the chase gets rolling, it never turns back. It's a great early glimpse at Spielberg's knack for finding the humanity at the heart of the story. Plus, it showcases an amazing early performance from Goldie Hawn, and one of Spielberg's darkest endings. Number 27, War Horse. Warhorse is a sprawling, gorgeous film. The cinematography is amazing. There are frames that could be put up on your wall as art. It was up for 6 Oscars, largely in cinematography, music, and the technical categories, but also Best Picture. But for all of the beauty on screen, the Richard Curtis pen script never quite delivers the goods. It might be that the focus gets too fractured, or it might just be a bit too sentimental, but the substance never quite reaches that impressive style. Number 26, The Post. The fact that Spielberg can have multiple Best Picture nominees in his bottom 10 films speaks to just how tremendous a director he is. The Post has a terrific message about the importance of a legitimately free press. It also has some great performances, not just by the leads, but by the supporting cast, most notably Bob Odenkirk. Doesn't always work, though. It can swing between luxury and a bit too overly optimistic. It has great intentions, but maybe needs a bit of that grit that we saw from Spielberg with Munich. Number 25, Duel. It is pretty rare that a film starts on TV and then gets re-released into theaters, but that was the case with Duel. Duel's a small movie. Dennis Weaver gets terrorized by a truck. That's pretty much it. There isn't a lot of dialogue, and the original runtime was just over an hour, but there is a lot of terror in that small package. It looks a little bit made for TV because it was, but it is amazing to see what a good director can do even under the constraints of a TV budget. Number 24, Amistad. Another Academy Award nominee that has somewhat mixed reviews. Amistad is an effective, at times devastating film that arguably spends a bit too much time in the courtroom. There are flaws, sure, but Spielberg's depiction of the slave ships is visceral and heartbreaking, and Djimon Hounsou steals every scene with his pure, raw emotion. Number 23, Hook. I loved Hook as a kid. I still quote Hook all the time. If you yell bangarang or say, "There you are, Peter," most folks are gonna understand. Rufio is the coolest. Hoffman's maybe the best Captain Hook ever. Bob Hoskins is certainly the best Smee ever. And the whole thing has that kind of TMNT style, early 90s neon charm. The shine has faded a bit, though, now that I've grown up. The beginning feels longer, the end is a bit flatter, but it's still one of those films that is an instant key to unlocking childhood. Number 22, War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds has been made and remade a lot of times in a lot of formats. At this point, you pretty much need to switch it up to warrant a new version. Spielberg does exactly that, adding a very Spielberg-y divorce subplot and upping the stakes by bringing kids into the mix. To his credit, a lot of it works. We really don't want to see anything bad happen to Dakota Fanning. The aliens are huge and imposing and terrifying, and they're shown just the right amount. But some bits don't work quite as well, like the people in the basket and the too convenient ending. But you can tell that Spielberg cares about the story, and it's pretty cool to see his take. Number 21, The Adventures of Tintin, Spielberg's only foray into animation or digital motion capture if you want to get specific, and it's pretty good. It's a fast-moving adventure in the spirit of Indiana Jones, even if it doesn't quite achieve the same charm. It's simple, globe-trotting, afternoon matinee escapism at its best, with just enough mystery mixed in to keep it interesting. Here's hoping that Peter Jackson finally delivers on that sequel. Number 20, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It isn't as non-stop adventure-y as Raiders, and Willie is a lot of steps down from Marion, but Temple of Doom still has more than its fair share of thrills and iconic moments. The minecart scene is amazing, and there are very few movie memories as clear as the vision of Mola Ram pulling that dude's still beating heart right out of his chest. Temple of Doom's kind of the fear factor of the indie series, all monkey brains and eating bugs and rooms full of cockroaches. It's a lot darker and a little bit messier, but it's pretty fun. Number 19, The Lost World. This one got a lot of flack when it came out, mostly due to that final act in San Diego. And those people have kind of a point, but the first 3/4 of this movie are way cooler than they get credit for. There's more Jeff Goldblum, more dinosaurs, and a bunch of fun stuff like the dual T-Rex attack and those raptors in the high grass. And even if some parts don't work, this was only the second movie to have real looking dinosaurs, and they actually look even better than they did the first time. Quite frankly, that is more than enough for me. Number 18, Always. This remake of A Guy Named Joe is a surprisingly sad film about loss dressed up as a syrupy romance. Dreyfuss, Hunter, and Goodman all add levels of depth with their performances. The plot is ludicrous, but it still kind of feels real and definitely heartbreaking in the most bittersweet of ways. Plus, it features Audrey Hepburn in her final performance. Number 17, Minority Report. Minority Report is a sci-fi action thriller with a brain. It loosely expands on a Philip K. Dick short story and asks questions that have only grown more important today. It does a great job of balancing noir with viable visions of a dystopian future. And okay, maybe Tom Cruise kind of plays Tom Cruise, but Colin Farrell and Samantha Morton more than make up for it. Number 16, AI, Artificial Intelligence. If this film had ended with that scene on Coney Island, it would have been heartbreaking and wonderful, but as it is, it's still a pretty cool film and sneakily grown up. Kubrick's fingerprints are all over it, with a number of scenes coming straight from the drawings that he'd made over the many years that he worked on the project. It's a really interesting collaboration. A pretty terrific modern fairy tale, just turn it off a little bit early. Number 15, Munich. A nuanced look at terrorism and counterterrorism. Munich is one of Spielberg's most complex and adult movies. It's also probably his least Spielberg-feeling movie. The writing, the editing, the morally gray area, everything is just a bit risky and jagged. Even Williams' soundtrack feels edgier. And of course, at the heart of all of it is a nuanced performance by Eric Bana. It's dark, challenging, and a pretty excellent film. Number 14, Ready Player One. No, it's not as good as the book. The book is really different and it's rad as heck, and you should go read it if you haven't. But the movie is its own thing that kind of riffs on the book, and even if it isn't as good, it's still pretty darn good. It was actually kind of cool getting to see Percival and his gang of VR vigilantes take on a new set of challenges, and it's a lot of fun watching Spielberg play in the world that he helped create. Even if the paint is a bit different, the heart and the fun and the deluge of 80s references are still in full effect. Number 13, Empire of the Sun. Possibly Spielberg's most overlooked film. This coming-of-age movie set in the internment camps of World War II Japan is partly about holding on to innocence and partly about growing up too fast. It features some of the most beautiful shots Spielberg has ever filmed. Just look up the scene where 12-year-old Christian Bale's waving at that plane, or the bomb going off in the distance, or any of a dozen gorgeous, unforgettable moments. Plus, Malkovich is in it, and he's great. Number 12, Bridge of Spies. A movie about a Cold War prisoner exchange should not be this interesting. There's no real action. The main character is an insurance lawyer. The settings are almost exclusively gray and dour, but somehow this movie is fascinating. A big part of that is Mark Rylance's Oscar-winning performance as the Russian agent. but as well as Hanks, who does some of the most underrated work of his career. At the heart of it, though, is Spielberg, who builds each layer of this story with expert precision. Number 11, The Color Purple. In a lot of ways, The Color Purple was Spielberg's first real grown-up film. His handling of Alex Walker's book still has a bit of that classic Spielberg saccharine, but it surprisingly doesn't pull punches, and other than a few notable exceptions, mostly avoids the grand moments, instead focusing on those tiny slices of life, both good and terrible. It's gorgeously shot and brilliantly acted. This film ushered in a new stage in Spielberg's career. Number 10, Lincoln. It really can't be overstated just how good Daniel Day-Lewis is. We all know he's good, but then you watch him and gee whiz, he is captivating every moment he is on the screen, bringing a mix of strength and fragility and anger and kindness that all serve to humanize an almost mythical figure. It's maybe a smidge long, and the courtroom angle doesn't always work, but the moments that work far outweighs the ones that don't. It's pretty close to being the best of Spielberg's histories. Number 9, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This is probably the most divisive of the Indiana Jones movies. Detractors of Last Crusade say that it is too much like Raiders of the Lost Ark, while its fans will say it's a lot like Raiders of the Lost Ark. What really sets it apart is Sean Connery. Sean Connery would be fantastic to watch as this worrying academic character in anything, but he's doubly fantastic in that father-son dynamic with Henry Jr. It's a new twist on a recipe that works, which is kind of what adventure movie sequels are all about. Number 8, Catch Me If You Can. Spielberg's funniest movie by far is also a wonderful character study and a very personal look at the impact of divorce. At the center of it are two show-stopping performances by DiCaprio as the charming but sad rogue and Hanks as his determined by-the-book foil. The real beauty of this movie is watching Frank and Carl slowly reveal themselves to both us and to each other. Number 7, Saving Private Ryan. This film has earned its place amongst the greatest war films for that opening battle alone. It's been said over and over, but never has the chaos and terror of war been so keenly captured on film. As affecting as that opening is, though, it's Captain Miller and his boys that keep us immersed. Hanks, Ribisi, Davies, Burns, heck, even Vin Diesel. Everyone brings their A game. It's an impassioned journey that balances horror, brotherhood, and sacrifice as only a war movie can. Number 6, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Why Close Encounters works is because we can see ourselves in this situation, which is a pretty big task for a movie about aliens. The film features Richard Dreyfuss at his absolute best as a man obsessed with finding the truth. He somehow remains likable even as he creates chicken wire mountains and chases his family away. The last act might be a bit slow for modern tastes, but the pace really does make us feel like we're there experiencing every amazing moment of first contact. Number 5, Jurassic Park. Do you remember the first time you saw that brachiosaur come into view to John Williams' incredible score? I was in a way that I haven't been since I first watched a couple of droids roll through the desert. Jurassic Park brought dinosaurs to life. In 1993, that was an unbelievable promise to make, but this movie delivered in spades. Number 4, Raiders of the Lost Ark. First of the Indiana Jones films is Spielberg recreating the adventure matinees he loved as a kid, and then making a movie that was somehow even better than the ones he remembered growing up. It starts with the best cold open of all time, and that pace just never lets up. Ford perfectly captures the space between archaeologist and adventurer, and Kate Allen's Marion Ravenwood is his ideal counterpart. This movie is why we go to the theater. Number 3, Jaws. A masterclass in pacing. Spielberg lets the tension grow slowly on Amity Island, giving us time to get to know our heroes before they're thrown on a boat with the most memorable captain in film history. What could have been a cheesy monster movie with a rubber shark instead becomes a beautifully shot story of a man conquering his fears set against a perfectly faded blue and tan background. It's a horror movie in a perfect 3-act structure with both scares and heart to spare. Number 2, Schindler's List. A beautiful, sometimes crushing, cinematic masterpiece. Spielberg walks us through the Holocaust from first to last, holding our hand but never hiding the horrible truth. The passion and compassion behind this film is astounding. It tells the true story of absolute evil but never loses its humanity or connection to that spark of light in the darkness. Schindler's List is a story of hope set against the absolute starkest of backdrops, with Kingsley, Fiennes, and Neeson pouring their all into every heartbreaking scene. Number 1, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. E.T. is childhood in a bottle. Spielberg captures the magic of your best summer vacation, your favorite Halloween costume, the first time you had your heart broken, and the most fun you've ever had with your family. And he smushes it all together in the form of an adorable alien. It feels alive and hopeful and true in a way that only childhood does. It's everything that we love about Steven Spielberg melted into one perfect film. And that's it. There is a very slim mathematical chance that you completely agreed with me, and a very high one that you deeply disagreed with at least one placement of a film on this list. That's cool. Just let me know your faves in the comments and which films I need to take another look at. And as always, please like and subscribe and check out some of the other videos on this channel. And hopefully, I'll see you all next time.